Put God first.
Your presence in their lives gives them validation.
Our children don't need us to be superheroes.
If you do these things, the next generation and the generations that follow will live in a world far better than the one we have today.
Men, stand up, be fathers.
Hey guys, welcome back. This is Mark. I am your host and founder of this podcast and the platform which is the Inspired Legacy. And if you're new here, this is the show that equips and inspires you to unleash your inner lion and reveal your true purpose as spiritual leaders in your home. So important these days as you just turn on the news and look around and see what's happening out in the world. We need more men, more fathers stepping up and leading the next generation. I really believe it's the only way we're going to turn things around in the long run. Well, it feels good to be back behind the microphone. I have not recorded in a while. I had a batch of episodes done and in the can, and so I have not sat down behind the microphone for a while. I was revisiting my recorded episode for today and was just reminded of how great this content is that you guys are going to hear today. Today, I'm talking with Pastor Josh Gagnon. He is the founding and lead pastor of Next Level Church, and he's also the author of a book, It's Not Over. And guys, this is, like I said, it's great content, and maybe it's just because it really spoke to me personally, especially this season of life that I'm going through right now. I don't think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I recently left my 11.5-year career to start my own business, and as well as to continue to grow and pour into this ministry, the Inspired Legacy. And so I'm in this season where I'm really having to lean on the Lord and trying to pray and seek His guidance. And so what we talked about, or what I talked about today in this episode with Josh, really speaks to where I'm at in life. And so I think that's probably one of the reasons why I took so much away from this conversation. And I'm going back over my notes here, and I usually take notes with all of my guests, but I took like 3 pages of notes on this episode just because, again, so much of it spoke to me. So I hope you guys take something away from this, because I know that if I'm going through a season where this is relevant, I know that somebody listening is as well. So guys, I'm excited for you to hear this. Josh has got a lot of great insight and just a different perspective on how we can be praying and how that impacts our dreams and how it can hopefully change your life. So enjoy my conversation with Pastor Josh Gagnon.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we dive in, I always kind of like to qualify my guests. Tell us about your dad life. What do you got going on at home?
Dad life's exciting. My boys are Malachi and Nehemiah. They are 12 and 11. Matter of fact, this summer they turned 13 and 12, and so we're stepping into some new territory.
Those are some fun and interesting years.
Yeah, I've been telling them a lot. We had the first season of Life Boys. We were working on things like how to walk and how to eat, and then we moved into how to talk with honor. And I said, now listen, this next season of life, we're going to be stepping into some responsibilities and making sure I'm developing men that can lead in their homes in the future. And so we've been talking a lot about this transition of when dad's working in the yard, when dad's doing things, you're not going to sit on the couch anymore. You're not going to be too young to help. Now it's time to step into the game, and I'm raising men. And so it's been a fun season, though. They love golf. They're actually really good golfers. They've both broken 90 at 12 years old and 11 years old. And so they're avid golfers. They're great kids. I'm super blessed. My wife Jennifer, of course, is a main reason why our 2 boys are young men of respect and honor, and blessed to have them.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and I appreciate the shout out to your wife, because us men, we like to take credit for a lot of things, but those of us blessed with a good spouse, that's pretty critical.
Yeah.
So let's jump into this book, because I'm just really intrigued. I stumbled across you on Instagram, and I think it was an ad, like a sponsored ad for your book.
Okay.
And I saw your little promo. I'm like, man, that sounds really needed, A, and then B, I just really was gravitated to your passion and the vibe that you had in your ad there, and the topic of the book, I think really aligns with where men's hearts are today, because so many of us men have hopes and dreams, but we just kind of shrug them off because we feel like the window has closed, and we just kind of succumb to the daily grind, and we don't really pursue those big God-inspired dreams. And so first, let's start with what inspired you to write this book, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm an underdog. I've been an underdog from birth, I think. I was a basketball player growing up, but I was an underdog. I'm only 5'9", and so in a sport where there's giants, I was an underdog, yet I was able to play college ball. I played a little bit of professional leagues in Canada. And so,
oh, wow.
I was always an underdog in that sport.
You're really, like the Spud Webb?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I've just always been an underdog, even when it comes to leading a church. I never went off to Bible college the traditional way. I took classes online to study the Word of God, to learn the Word of God. When I first felt called to be a pastor, I write about it in the book. I went out with my pastor at the time. I had told nobody this call of God on my life, that I felt God was just calling me to preach His word. And I would sit at home, and I'd never preached a message in front of anybody, never went to Bible school, but I'd sit at home and I'd preach in my house, or I'd preach in my car. I'd just be trying to lead people to Jesus. Of course, nobody's listening, but I just had this burning desire inside of me. And here I am doing all that. I didn't tell anybody in the world that this was a passion in my heart. I was embarrassed by it because I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel qualified enough. I didn't feel smart enough. I didn't feel like I went through the correct channels through college, so on and so forth. The idea of being a pastor seemed way too big for me to ever step into. And so just as this underdog, I was on the 10th hole of a course playing golf with my pastor at the time. And he would be the first person I ever told. And I said, hey, I feel like God wants me to be a pastor. And I was running a drywall company at the time. And he looked back at me and said, I think you should stick with drywall. And I can remember just thinking, man, like the first person I ever told shot me down. And
yeah,
it's just
no kidding.
It's just kind of been the story of my life. It feels like, even with this book, it's not over. I was pastoring a growing church at the time. So we'll say it was 3 to 4 years ago now. And I was pastoring a growing church. We had many locations, and an agent reached out to me. He's like, hey, man, you ever thought about writing a book? I was like, absolutely. All I do every weekend is create content. It would be great for it to last longer than 40 minutes on a stage.
Sure.
And put it on some paper. And he's like, all right, man, listen, I know for a fact we can get you a book deal. Let's do this, put together a proposal. So we do all that. We put together the proposal. We send it out to all the major publishers. And one by one, they get back to me and say, no. And I asked my agent, I'm like, what in the world? Why? He said, because nobody wants to sign an author in New England. That's where I live. New England. It's the least church region of America. And they said they sell the least amount of Christian books in that region, and no one wants to take a risk on you. And I can remember when I got that last no, all leads dried up. He said, I sat in the shower and just cried. I didn't even tell my wife for a week about that, because I was afraid to face that failure. And so it's just kind of over and over again. It kind of feels like, for me, I've lived as this underdog that was told no, and I had to continue to fight through walls that were standing in front of me for me to ever end up seeing what God had called me to see. It's never been a world where I just easily stepped into the next chapter. I've kind of lived in this life where if I believe God called me to it, I was going to have to bang down some walls in order to see it come to life. And so, with this book, another agent reached out to me a year later and was like, hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I was like, listen, I'm not even talking to you. And I didn't get back to that agent for an entire year, this next agent, an entire year, because I didn't want to open up the possibility again of being rejected and feeling like a failure. And yet I couldn't put out that fire in my heart. And so a year later, I reached back out and I was like, listen, I'm scared of failure. I feel unqualified. I feel afraid of being rejected. I don't feel good enough as it is. And when I get rejected, it just confirms what I feel about myself. And he said, listen, let's give it a try. I really feel like this could work. And by God's grace, that next time we got 6 offers for this book by 6 of the largest Christian publishers, and they were fighting over it. And so once again, I saw how it felt like it was over. And yet I saw that God was doing more in me in that season of failure that I thought was failure. He was doing more in me than he was doing through me, so that he could end up doing more through me than I could ever imagine. And I'm often have to, remind myself, and I think as men, we have to remind ourselves that David didn't become king before he was a shepherd in a field of loneliness, of wonder, of insecurity, of development. And so God's always preparing us in the shepherd's field for what he's prepared for us in our future. And so I have to remember continuously through these seasons, never despise the shepherd's field, because that's where you're prepared for the palace.
That's good stuff, man. Yeah. And it's a good reminder. That story is a good reminder that, if something is laid on our heart by God, the world is going to do all it can to prevent that from happening. Right. And so you basically went through, it sounds like a 2-year span of kind of fighting for this dream that God had given you, and these opportunities that God had presented to you. But for whatever reason, the world was kind of shutting you down, but you just kind of stayed true to what was put on your heart.
Yeah. And I think that when God's called us to it, we have to remember that we're going to face obstacles. I like to say, don't get discouraged when you face opposition, be encouraged, because anything worth chasing down is going to have opposition in its way. In the book, I talk about how discouragement I used to look at as something that was bad, but I've actually started to see discouragement a little bit different. I've never been discouraged over something that didn't matter. And so discouragement is spiritual evidence we're chasing after something that's still worthy of chasing after. And for me, I kind of have to frame it through that. When I'm feeling discouraged about something, I don't need to sit on the sideline. I have to remind myself, well, that discouragement is coming from this spiritual evidence that it's something that actually matters. For instance, for men who are facing addictions, right? We often become discouraged in the battle against an addiction, and then we give up in the fight due to the discouragement of not overcoming it. But I think we should use that discouragement as fuel to remember that that's still the Spirit and the conviction of the Holy Spirit confirming to us that it's still worthy of overcoming. So discouragement, once again, it proves to us what it is we're chasing after or trying to defeat, whatever that looks like. Discouragement proves to us that there's still spiritual evidence that it's something that still matters to our heart or to the heart of God. And so that's something that I think that I've learned is there's been other things that, for instance, I chased down that I no longer am discouraged after. Like, I want to be a professional basketball player. I don't wake up every morning discouraged over that, right? Because it's not part of my life anymore. And so I think for me, I try not to let discouragement pull me off the track of what it was I was once chasing.
Yeah, that's good perspective. And you lived with a lot of hope during that season of trying to get that book deal to come together. But I know a lot of people, they have a hard time living with hope. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many people have a hard time living with hope?
Yeah, the Bible tells us in Proverbs 13:12, it says, "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a dream fulfilled is a tree of life." And that word deferred, I think, really ties into the word expectations. And in my life, when it comes to expectations, I've often expected God to do something in my timing. I've often expected God to move on my behalf in a way that I thought he would do it. And I've had to learn that my expectations have to be submitted to God. And so there's surrendered expectations, and then there's unsurrendered expectations. And we talk about that. We talk about that in the book. And I think that's really the root of hopelessness. Hope deferred, hope pushed away, hope delayed makes that heart sick. And so I think for many of us, we had a hope of whatever that looks like, getting married, stepping into that career, having kids, whatever it looks like, whatever that idea of success could have looked like, overcoming an addiction. We had this hope to do something. And then when it's deferred, we start to see delays as God's denials. But we have to remember that delays are not denials. Delays could be seasons of preparation. And so for me, I think hopelessness happens when we once believed something would become a reality, yet we haven't seen it. And we're usually okay for a short time, but when month goes by or years go by and we've had that hope deferred, it starts to make our heart sick. The Bible talks about this sick heart, this heart that's sick, and that virus can look like discouragement. It can look like despair. It can look like failure. It can look like depression, right? It can look like hopelessness. And so that heart being sick comes with the virus of those viruses. And I think for many of us, we've given up on a future of hope because we've allowed past damages or past moments where our hopes were deferred to create a sickness that doesn't allow us to move forward today. And so, I think when we look at where does hopelessness come from, why are there so many men that are living defeated over the yesterdays that they've encountered? Why are there so many men that are living their lives today underneath the shadow of yesterday? I would say because they once had dreams, they once had hopes, and because those were deferred, because there was a space between what they hoped for and what became a reality. In that space, our spiritual enemy talks us out of our potential in Christ. And so I think that's where I see many people die, many hopes dies in that space between what we once believed and what we hoped for not become a reality in the timeline that we hoped.
Yeah, that's so true. The timeline, that's so key, because so many, and I can speak with a lot of authority on this just because in experiences in my own life, but things that we want to see come to fruition they rarely happen on our timeline, right? They happen on God's timeline, and those two timelines are rarely the same. So that's a good reminder.
I don't know the years. And so this is definitely potentially not accurate what I'm about to say. I think, and once again, I'm not giving this as an absolute. I think there was 22 years between David being anointed and becoming king. I think there was 22 years in between there. Once again, I'm not positive. However, there was a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that in that place where we feel called to something, yet we don't see it, is often where the dream dies. The other thing I think is it's not only dreams that die, it's our spiritual passion and our spiritual walk in Christ that gets damaged. I think our prayer life and our dream life, or our hope life, I think they're one and the same. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you a story. I was because I think this is a really powerful part of my book, and I think it's a really important part of the story of It's Not Over. I was at dinner a few years ago with one of our executive team members, Daniel, and his wife, Catherine. They were the first hires I ever made at Next Level Church. I started in 2008. We had 12 people. I wasn't even on staff paid. And he came to me. He's like, "Hey, are you hiring?" I was like, "I'm not even hired." He's like, "Well, can I raise my own money, be a part of this?" I was like, "Sure, why not?" I mean, I take anything that's breathing. I would start, in 2008, it's like, come on the team. And so him and his wife, they enter our team, and they're trying to have a kid, and they had, different miscarriages, and they were fighting to have a child. And finally they got the news that they were having a son. And they went to get an ultrasound done, and they saw that their son's kidneys were failing. One of them was completely failing, and the other one, they weren't sure was going to be okay. And so it was a really, difficult pregnancy. And I got a phone call one morning from Daniel. He said, "Hey, Catherine's had the baby. Can you get to the hospital? It's worse than they thought." And so I get to the hospital as quick as I can, and I get there, and I see Daniel, and he's crying, and I give him a big hug, and I go in, I talk with Catherine, and I pray with them, and we find out that Josiah, he has many medical concerns. He has many, many different things going on, conditions, and he goes through 30 surgeries or something like that in the first year of his life, and they're praying for him, and just while I was writing this book, actually, it wasn't going to be in the book, but as I was writing the book, I sat down with Daniel and Catherine at dinner one night. We were just talking, and I asked Catherine, I said, "What's been the hardest part of the last 10 years?" And she said, "Praying." And I was surprised. I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, praying's been the hardest part." I said, "Can you explain that?" And with tears rolling down her face, she said, "I used to pray with so much passion. I used to pray believing that God would heal my baby. I can remember putting my hands on my belly and praying for Josiah to be healed, and I really believed God would do it. And then as Josiah was born, I've been praying, and I was praying for years. I prayed, and then God never moved. And I'd see my son in another surgery, and I'd see my son in another sickness, and I was like, where are you, God?" And she said, "Now when I look back over the years," she said, "praying is so hard for me." She said, "I used to pray big, bold prayers, and now they're just small and they're just safe because I feel so defeated." And that was the first time where I realized that our hope life and our prayer life, they're not in two separate lanes. They're one and the same. that when we're in a season of where hope is deferred, it's not just giving up on that dream that becomes reality. It's the entire fabric of our spirituality in Christ is damaged often. We stop praying not just for that one dream, but we stop praying with boldness in so many other dreams. And I can see that in my life at times. I can see that in my life so often, that when I'm praying for one thing to happen and God's not moving, it really hurts the fabric of my entire walk with Christ. And I start to pray small, safe prayers. And so, inside this book, in that chapter, we talk about how to pray big, bold prayers, even when it feels like God's not listening, even when it feels like things aren't moving the direction we hope they would move. And I think for everybody listening, for the men that are listening, I wonder if everybody can relate to me and see that the damage, that the deferred hopes of the past have damaged the passion for spirituality, not just in those things, but in many other things in our life in the present.
Man, that's good stuff. So as we talk about dreams, a lot of guys have dreams like we've talked about, but what would you say are the characteristics of a dream that we should, kind of watch for to know that it's a dream, put in our hearts and our minds by God, that it's a dream worth chasing?
Yeah. I mean, we all have, like I said, I had a dream to be a basketball player, and that didn't become a reality. And so I think there are different things we can look for. I think it's always attention. There's always attention, but I encourage people to look for where there's a need. I think dreams, a need will be there. What breaks your heart today? What are some needs in the world or the community that catch your attention, right? So we look at the life of Nehemiah, and I think we can see in the Bible, we can see a lot of characteristics of a dream. The dream to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem started because Nehemiah saw a need that could be met. That's one of the characteristics of a dream. An opportunity. Where's God opening up doors in your life? Where does the hand of God just seem to be moving? What are some opportunities that have made you feel excited, right? And if you didn't take those opportunities in the past, what are some opportunities even today that you're noticing or around you that excite you? I think our dreams will match our abilities and in our experiences. So what are the unique ways that God has created you? What are the unique things that God has called you to do, talents that he's given you? And I think a characteristic of a dream is opposition. You're always going to have opposition in the face of a dream. Opposition is part of the recipe. There's never been a dream that's been fulfilled outside of great opposition. We see that in the story of Nehemiah in Scripture. People trying to talk him out of building the wall, and he says, I can't come down off the wall. I'm doing a good work. I have to stay faithful. And opposition can't be the thing that pulls us away from our God-given potential. And so for me, those are some of the things. One of the things about a dream that I think it's important to realize is there's two types of dreams. There's two types of dreams. There's the dream that's inside of us, and then there's the dreams that are around us. We often think about the dreams that are around us as the word dream, because the word dream has become a lot like the word love, right? I love ice cream and I love Jesus. It's like, okay, how do those coexist? Like how does the same word describe both of those? Well, it really doesn't. Just the word love has become much more broad. And so the same thing with the word dream. There's been books written on it. There's been people talking about chase your dreams. And so I think the word dream, we often think of it as chasing down that career or starting up that business or getting married, something on the outside of us. But for me, and I talk about this in the book, dreams are also those things on the inside of us. Those things like overcoming insecurity for me would be a huge thing. Overcoming addictions, those are dreams. So there's many dreams that are on the inside of our heart that we're still needing to chase down, that we've given up on. So a dream isn't only something on the outside of us that we're trying to accomplish. It's also something on the inside of us often that we're trying to accomplish. And I think it's important to remember that that dreams come in both of those worlds.
Man, you've really got my wheels turning here. This is a deep and thought-provoking topic. And, I usually try to have read some or all of books of the authors that I interview. I've not read yours yet, but I'm going to get on Amazon and order this thing. And awesome. I'm not just saying that because you're on my show. This has really got my wheels turning. I periodically talk about the significance of, on this show anyway, talk about the significance of surrounding yourself with the right people. And you kind of touched on that earlier, having a dream that aligns with your strengths and your your strengths and your what you bring to the table, and it helps to have people in your life that can help validate that. So what kind of people would you say can either, like, I don't know, accelerate or extinguish a person's dream? And we might go back to your story of, you know, you were on the golf course with your pastor and you finally revealed to the first person what was on your heart, and you kind of got shot down. And I'm not saying he was an accelerator or an extinguisher per se, but what kind of people should we kind of surround ourselves with to make sure that happens?
Yeah, I spend an entire chapter on that in the book, which I think is it's a fun chapter. I talk about zombies, vampires, sidekicks, and heroes. And so those are the 4 different categories of people that we're all surrounded by. It's not like we may be surrounded by them. We all have zombies, vampires, sidekicks, and heroes in our life. At least we should have sidekicks and heroes. So for me, what I've done in this book to kind of break those down is I've talked about how there's those vampires in our life, and those are the people that they really just kind of suck the life out of our dreams, right? It's and they're not bad people. Like, these aren't just people going around trying to ruin everybody's life. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying those are the people that you're at a dinner table with, and they just happen to say these things that always just kind of suck the life out of you. It's like, hey man, I'm really hoping to break this addiction, and they're like, yeah, you've tried that before. Let's see what happens. And you're like, oh man, that really just kind of sucked life out of me. And once again, it's not that they're bad people. It's often just, they often come as just immature Christians. And I've found that in my life, that there are a lot of people that they just say certain things that pull the life out of me, and they pull the belief in my dream out of me. It's those people that after you spend time with them, you feel a little less hopeful and you have a little less energy than you did when you entered the conversation. And so we talk about how there's going to be vampires in all of our lives. And then there's zombies in our lives. Those are the people we got to be really careful with, because vampires suck the life out of us, but they don't derail us. They don't necessarily take us completely off track. Zombies, well, those are the people that pull us completely away from what God has planned for us. So it could be that person at the office that's winking at you, and you know that they're giving you attention you shouldn't be receiving. Maybe you're a married man, and these are the zombies. These are people in my life. For me, a zombie in my life, and I didn't put, the editor didn't keep this in the book, but I talk about the first time I looked at pornography. I was a teenager, and it was back in the day where you didn't just have it anywhere you wanted on internet. It was back in the day where the squiggly lines on the TV would go on, like, you could go on like HBO or whatever, and there'd be like the squiggly lines on the R-rated or channels that were showing pornography or whatever. And I can remember I went over to my cousin's house for the first time, and he had that on his TV, and every once in a while you'd catch glimpses of what you shouldn't catch. And I can remember that moment as if it was literally branded on my brain. And it would be the first time that I'd ever look at something like that. And that would be this zombie type experience, someone that brought death, someone that was trying to bring death into my life, someone that was trying to pull me completely off course of what God had desired for me to do. That happens relationally. It can happen in many different arenas in business when it comes to financial integrity. It's just these decisions that pull us completely away from what God has planned for us. That can derail our dreams. We talked about vampires. They kind of suck the life out of us. They don't kill us, but they suck the life out of us. And then we talk about sidekicks, and this gets a little bit better now. We talk about how, Robin to Batman, we all need sidekicks in our life. Sidekicks are people that will speak truth into your heart because they're doing life with you. I have this rule in my life. I never let anyone speak into my dream unless they're willing to sweat alongside of me inside of my dream.
Oh, that's good.
And so you're willing to speak into my dream, and you can even speak no's into my dream. I have men in my life, or my wife, who will speak into my dreams, and they're not yes men, or she's not a yes wife. They'll tell me, no, man, I think you were wrong there, or I think you need to go a different direction, or I think you're out of line. Like, they speak truth to me. The difference is I don't let everybody speak that truth to me. If you're not willing to sweat alongside me while I'm chasing down my dreams, you're not allowed to speak inside of my dreams. And so that's the rule. It's not creating bubbles where people just go with whatever you say. It's managing who you give influence to. And so we have sidekicks, people that do life with you. We don't listen to everybody sitting in the stands with ketchup and mustard, screaming at the players on the field. Listen, if you listen to everybody with ketchup and mustard screaming at the people on the field will never accomplish anything. But I will listen to the people on the field with me. Those are my sidekicks. And then there's heroes, and I've got all sorts of heroes. Men who have gone before me and are accomplishing today what I hope to accomplish tomorrow. They are the targets I'm aiming my life at. So there's a guy named Gordon MacDonald. He wrote a book. He's written several books. One, Ordering Your Private World. And he's a hero in my life. He's in his 80s. I get together with him often. Pastored some great churches. And I could give you all sorts of names of heroes that are national figures. And then I can give you heroes that nobody in the world would ever hear of. But they're a wise, faithful saint that's walking with Jesus, has the marriage I hope to have the finances I hope to have at a day or in a time of life I hope to have them. So I try to surround myself with people who are ahead of me that can create a target for me in order for me to aim at. I don't want to just live life aimlessly. And so they have the marriage I hope to have, the finances I hope to have, the kids I hope to have, and I try to make sure I get around them so I can learn how to get to where it is they've gotten, so I don't have to make it up as I go, but I can learn from their wisdom. So vampires, zombies, sidekicks, and heroes, we talk about that in the book.
Yeah, man, that's really interesting. And so I want to revisit these a little bit. So I think that for some people, the lines could be really blurry between some of these categories of people. So like in my mind, the way you described zombies and heroes, there's a clear difference, but I could see where for some people it might be hard to distinguish between a hero and a zombie, because I think there's a lot of zombies out there who on the surface look like heroes. You think of I'm not saying every professional athlete is like this, but there's some professional athletes out there that, kind of have that celebrity status and look really appealing, especially to the youth. But as people, as individuals, they're not really worth following.
Yeah.
There's many who are, but many who aren't. And so I think that it's important to just be able to draw that line, especially when when it comes to our kids, to be able to help them understand, who really is a genuine hero and who is a hero in a costume, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, the heroes are people we're actually doing life with.
Yeah.
And so they're not heroes from a distance that we're seeing on TV or celebrities. So all of my heroes are people that I call for wisdom, people I get together with for breakfast. I don't think anybody can be a hero from a distance. So I completely agree with what you're saying. I think heroes, you can have celebrities from a distance. You can be influenced from a distance and have influences from a distance. But for me, I don't know how anybody could have a hero that they don't have a relationship with. Because I think to have a hero means you have to know the life of integrity that they live in all arenas of their life. And so for me, my heroes and the heroes I encourage everybody who reads this book to have are not, once again, they're not necessarily celebrities, because not everybody's in a position where they can have relationship with celebrities so that they can become their heroes, right? But it could be the person down the road that runs a business, and they're older than you, and they're running a good, successful business in your town. They are a man of integrity. They're a man of a woman of faith. They have a marriage that appears strong, so on and so forth. And maybe you sit down and you say, hey, could we get lunch together? Could we get breakfast together? I want to pick your brain. And over time, you build a relationship where they become a hero of yours because you actually see the interior reality of their life. And so for me, that's the idea inside of this book. It's not heroes from a distance that we don't have relationships with. These are heroes that we've actually built a relationship with, and we know for sure that they're living out areas of life that we hope to live out in purpose tomorroa.
Yeah,
they're living out today.
100%. Relationship is key. And then going back to vampires and kind of comparing that with sidekicks, I get how you're breaking that down, and I agree with it. Again, just kind of playing devil's advocate here a little bit, like, vampires don't necessarily pull us off course, but they kind of suck the life out of us to a degree, or deflate us. I think that there are sidekicks who, when they speak truth, truth can sometimes be deflating. And so I think that's just another important point to kind of distinguish that we can have sidekicks in our life who, with grace, tell us the truth, the things that we need to hear, and that we need to understand, that we need to know where their heart is when they say these things. Otherwise, they probably could come off as maybe being one of those vampires. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I think that's that. If you're not willing to sweat alongside me, you can't speak into it. And so for me, I think we know, if we really take a good hard look, we know who is for us, who's inside of our dreams, who's bleeding with us on the field. When you make this a sports illustration, it kind of, for me, clears it up. When there's no question on who's on the field at any given moment in a football team. We know who the players are on the actual field. And when you got that quarterback that goes over to that wide receiver and looks at him and says, man, listen, you have to start looking up. You got to catch that pass. You've got to so on and so forth. The reality is that could be deflating, and I'm sure it is deflating. But I take those words from somebody on the field that believes in me, that's throwing me the ball, that wants the best for me and of me. I take those words completely different than somebody who's just off in left field in the bleachers saying, hey, listen, I'm not sure you're ever going to overcome that addiction, or I don't think that's the right way to go. And so I think it's just balancing attention, where we recognize there are going to be people who are close to us that are going to speak life or are going to speak truth to us at times that we don't like. It's just managing the tension and understanding who you're allowing to speak that truth to. There's been many, many, many times in my life where I've had sidekicks speak into, for instance, I've written chapters in this book, It's Not Over, that I before it got published, I let some of my sidekicks read it, and some of them said it's not a good chapter. I wouldn't put it in. Man, when you spend all that time on a chapter, that's deflating when you hear that. Yeah. However, I only let people that I know truly want to see this book reach people for Jesus and truly believe that God's called me to write this book. I only let those people read the chapter. And so for me, I don't put out my desire for advice to everybody. I only put it out to people who I truly believe in my heart want the best for me and believe in the God-given dreams that God's given me. And so you have to have people in your life that are speaking truth to you. And truth isn't always easy, but if it's coming from the right voices, you can see that truth is actually a step forward rather than a step back.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think it's important to have your sidekicks be people who've earned their way into that role, right? You can't,
exactly.
Like you said, you can't just give that, assign that role to just anybody.
I only have about 5 of them.
Yeah, I think that's just fine. I think the smaller that circle is, the better it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Well, man, I have another question here that I feel like you've maybe already addressed to a certain degree, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just because it's relevant for me personally. I've had dreams for my life, and I'm currently working on bringing some of those dreams to reality. But they've led me to pray, that my dreams would become reality. So for the other prayer warriors out there listening, how does prayer factor in all of this?
Yeah, I think our prayers often become damaged, just like I was saying with Daniel and Catherine, and they become damaged because we haven't seen God move. And we start to think those delays are denials. I talk about a few different things. I'll unpack, I won't unpack them too much, but I'll give them out to you right now. But when we're struggling with dreams that aren't becoming a reality, some of the dangerous prayers that I pray, one of them would be, God, help me trust your character over my circumstances. And so that's something that I've learned to pray. Something I wrote about in the book is we have to trust God's character over our circumstances, because our circumstances are always wavering, but God's character is always the same. And so circumstances may change, people may change, but God remains the same. And so a dangerous prayer that we can pray every morning is, God, no matter what dream I see become a reality, no matter what hope seems deferred, God, help me trust your character over my circumstances. Because if we trust our circumstances, we're going to be running around like double-minded people, right? But if we trust God's character, we can end up somewhere on purpose. My mentor, pastor, friend, hero, Craig Groeschel, he says, everyone ends up somewhere, but few people get there on purpose. And so for me, that's something that he said to me, years ago. I think it's pretty popular now, but that's been something for me that's meant a lot to me. If I'm going to get somewhere on purpose, I have to trust in God's character over my circumstances. And so when it comes to prayer, I pray that. Another thing I talk about in the book is, God, help me see possibilities when I'm surrounded by impossibilities. I mean, that's a pretty big prayer to pray. When I'm surrounded by all the impossibilities of why I can't overcome the addiction, why that business will never start, why I'm a failure, why my marriage is broken and it won't be restored. When I'm surrounded by impossibilities, God, help me trust that you still are the God of the impossible. And then another prayer that I pray that I talk about in the book is, God, give me faith to say the words, even if you don't. One of my favorite moments in scripture is when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they say, even if he doesn't, I'm still not going to worship you, King Nebuchadnezzar. They're in a furnace. They're getting ready to die. And they said, even if he doesn't. And I think faith begins at the words, even if you don't. I think that's where faith begins. Faith doesn't begin at the words, God, you will. I think faith begins with the words, even if you don't, I still believe. And so for me, when it comes to prayers inside of dreams, the most dangerous prayer, but yet I think the one that keeps us the most holy or the most unified with Christ as we chase after dreams is, even if you don't do it the way I thought, even if you don't place me in that position, even if it doesn't happen, I still trust you, God. And I think that's that moment where we surrender our expectations to God and we live truly trusting that God is in control of our destiny.
All right, man. I needed to hear that. Thank you. Well, Josh, as we wind down here, one question I ask all my guests is, when you hear the phrase, the inspired legacy, or if you want to leave an inspired legacy, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, I think I can, because we're talking about the book, I think I can mention the last chapter of the book is titled Finish Strong. And I talk a lot about legacy. I talk about how to finish strong. I'll give this quick story. I mentioned this in the book. My wife wanted all of our shutters painted a different color. And I got a lift from Home Depot, and I was up in the sky trying to change these shutters, and I took one down and I painted it before she got home one day so I could surprise her. And she got home, and I had one shutter put up, one window changed. The shutters were changed, and finally she noticed it. She was like, "Oh my goodness, you're my hero!" Like she was all excited, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm the man." And she's like, "Oh, this looks great." She goes inside, and I can remember the feeling of looking at that house and recognizing I had changed just one window, and I had all the other shutters to go. It was so exciting that one moment that I was like, oh my gosh, what have I just opened up a can of worms, right? I was like, I can't believe I have to do every shutter now. And I talk about how finishing strong in the book, that starting is so much easier than finishing. So an inspired legacy, I think an inspired legacy lives with the reality that starting is easy, finishing is hard. Starting is easy, finishing is hard. Starting a marriage is easy. But finishing inside of a marriage of health, finishing inside of a marriage where you both fought for one another and you both fought fair with inside of your marriage, fought with integrity to keep your marriage pure. That's not easy. Starting, it's easy. Anybody can stand at an altar. That's simple. Yeah. Finishing strong isn't. Starting a family is easy, or having kids is easy. When it comes to the physical reality of it, we like to do that. We like to do what it takes to have kids. But now having and raising children of integrity, that's not easy. It would be easier to just let technology raise our kids. And that's the biggest, one of the greatest faults of our generation is our kids are going to get older and they're going to be babysat by technology for 18 years. And they're not going to have gained the integrity that it took to take them the rest of their life, because playing the Xbox to take up time and to avoid parenting at the age of 10 isn't what raises a kid that's going to be changing the world at 30. And so that's hard. Parenting is hard. Having kids, doing what it takes to have kids, we love to do that in the middle of the night, right? And so I talk about, in the book, finishing strong. So an inspired legacy for me is not a legacy of perfection. It's not a legacy outside of failure. It's not a legacy outside of hiccups and things that I would want to change. It's not a legacy outside of the reality that I'm an imperfect, broken man. But I think an inspired legacy is someday people will look and they'll say, he truly did want to finish the things he started strong. He truly was somebody who didn't just start things, but he fought to finish them. And when he messed up in the journey towards finishing, he got back on track, made it right, asked forgiveness, and continued to desire to finish strong. And so, that's a little bit of thinking on that. I'm just kind of spitballing right now.
No, that's so good, man. It's so good. It's one of the best answers I've had on the show. I love it. And I think that chasing Christ through it all ultimately will help us finish strong, right?
Amen. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, man, is there before we wind up here, is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to get off your chest, or that you would like to say to these men listening today?
I would say to the men listening today that you're doing better than you think you are. It's very difficult to be a man in today's culture. It really is. There's so much comparing. There's so many opportunities for insecurity. There's so many opportunities to feel like a failure. There's so much pressure. There's so much pressure on being a man today. We compare ourselves to every other highlight story, and it causes us to feel bad about our own. I would say that you've been fearfully and you've been wonderfully made, that God has a purpose for your life, that you don't have to be macho, but you can walk with a sensitive, open heart to God's love, and to remember that until you accept that Father's love, that you're never going to be a father that truly offers the love that you can offer to your family. I think accepting the love from the Father in heaven allows fathers on earth to give away that same love in a more pure way than we ever could in our own strength. And so I would say, just get broken before your daddy in heaven. You're still a little boy to him. Yeah. You may feel like you're an adult with the world on your shoulders, but to your heavenly Father, it's just like for us dads that have kids. I told my kid the other day, when are you, he said, Dad, do you still kiss your dad? And I said, yeah, I still give him a kiss once in a while. He's like, oh, I've never seen that. I said, what are you saying? Do you want me to stop kissing you? And he said, no. I said, listen to me right now. I said, when do you think you'll ever stop being my little boy? I said, when do you think, do you forget I was the first person to feed you and hold you and bathe you? I said, you're always going to be my little boy. And I would say that to the men when it comes to God. When did you stop being his little boy? You're always going to be his little boy. It's just we have to allow that fatherly love from heaven to change our love here on earth as fathers and as husbands. And so, I would say you're doing better than you think you are. Just let daddy's love consume you.
That's good stuff, man. Thanks for that. Josh, thanks for your time today. This was really good stuff. Where can people find you online and just keep track of what you're doing and find the book as well?
Yeah, anywhere books are sold, you can find the book. Amazon, of course, is the big seller of the book. I think they have it for the cheapest amount now, so it's not over. Anywhere books are sold. Social media, I just started Instagram, and I think I just started doing it in February. I think. Oh, wow. Yeah, I just started my account, I think, in February. I think my team had it going a few months before that, but my publisher was like, you need an Instagram account. I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I just started doing Instagram. You can come hang out with me there. It's just Josh Gagnon on Instagram. And then Facebook, I think, is Pastor Josh Gagnon. Anywhere you can find me. All right, man. Well, that's how you found me, right?
That's how I found you, yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll link to all that in the show notes. Josh, thanks again, man. This is really good stuff.
Thanks, Mark. Good hanging out with you, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Again, hope you took something away. If you did, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, but more importantly, share our message. Because when we work together to lift up fatherhood, we're going to change the world one dad at a time. Until next time, live inspired.